You are the president. It comes with the job, just like checking what you say and do comes with my job.
Meet Neil, but this is no ordinary Neil. This is Neil Cavuto.
Well, there weren't exactly people fleeing themselves off buildings, at least not that we could see today, but there were a near...
I do. Actually, I do, because in this particular, I've done this before, but in this particular...
And that's actually going to happen.
What was the deal with the last break? 57 million vaccine doses have been delivered. Only 35 million have actually gotten them, though. All of you, Jeff, I was thinking to you that joining on this journey will be both the oldest and youngest human beings ever to go into space.
We hope you enjoy. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Takin It Easy podcast. Alongside me I have Rowan and a huge special guest, Neil Cavuto. Thank you so much for coming on. Absolute privilege.
Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. So, all right, Neil, let's kind of take it back to, the roots. So who were you born to, and where'd you grow up? Where did it all start for you?
Well, I was born in New York. I had a father who was in sales, so we moved around a lot. I lived in Florida, Georgia, Connecticut, various states in the United States. It was one of these things where just when you were getting your roots established, you had to, up and leave. So, we traveled a good deal. So I had that. So I was lucky. Didn't go to Australia, but I went to Europe, Asia, South America, and all that stuff, but Australia's on my bucket list. I gotta get there.
Oh, beautiful.
That's it.
Well, you're born to an Italian father, right? So you have
Italian father,
you have
and Irish mom.
Oh, beautiful. Do you have any Italian in your locker, Neil? Or?
Well, I don't know. I mean, my wife will say sometimes I have that temper. It's a neat combination. My dad used to say that one part of you wants to take over the world and the other feels guilty about it. So I don't know which side he meant.
That's it. It's a bit unfortunate you didn't get the red hair genes in the Irish, but I mean, it looks like
Rowan got that.
That's right. Rowan got it. I have a son who has it, though. There we go.
That's right. That's very true. So was it kind of a favorite state that you grew up living, or one that had the biggest influence on you growing up anywhere?
I don't know. I mean, I love New York. I love the New York metropolitan area. I love being around cities and all. I like also to get away from that now and then. And of course, with COVID, as you guys know, it's turned everything upside down. So, a lot of times I can't do my show in New York as I used to be able to do, but out of a studio in my home. And it's just weird. The whole thing is very weird.
Yeah, no, 100%. And in terms of COVID, how has that affected your schedule, especially last year, Neil? Because I know it was going haywire in America at one point.
It was, and it is really. I mean, we're not quite experiencing the recurrence rates that you are and all, but it's messy. We've had the spikes of cases. We've just had a good many more who've been vaccinated. We're up to about 55-60% of the population here that has. And it's 70+% if you include those who've had at least one shot. But already we're hearing of a number of American firms that are putting off an in-person return to work. Apple's put things off a month. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, BlackRock, another month. Microsoft is talking about that. Amazon is talking about early next year. So, with these recurrence in cases, they're doing the things that, we thought we got over. You wear the mask again, proof of that you're negative or testing negative for the virus. You could go into a restaurant in New York, or you're indoors in New York. Same in California.
Yeah.
So, it's not quite as what you guys have been dealing with. But I think a lot of Americans just got a little cocky, a little ahead of themselves. We had a large percentage who refused to get vaccines. It wasn't an issue of vaccine availability. I don't know what the issue is in Australia, but plenty of vaccines here, but a lot of people were dead set against using them, and it's come back to bite them.
Yeah, no, I was going to actually ask that, Neil. So your job being the one presenting and giving the news to people, do you feel responsible for giving out true news and maybe, let's say if you're talking about the vaccine, getting people to get the vaccine, or do you feel like that's just somebody's opinion that you can't change?
Well, especially in a world where there's so much fake news on social medias and articles. And I feel like especially with a lot of news and reporters, a lot of them, they just want to get to it first, whether it's true or fake. They just want to be the first person to post it. So like with Pat saying in your case, how do you feel about being able to either get the truth out or like presenting that to America and the world?
Yeah, I'm probably a dinosaur in this respect, but for me, it's just the news. No one cares what my opinions are. I don't even care what my opinions are. And they have no point in my broadcast. They have no point in what I do. We hear a lot of rabid opinions on the right and on the left. I'm not pointing fingers. I just don't think it's constructive, certainly with the virus, to be going on that, or to, start looking at sinister intentions everywhere you look. So when I look at the medical facts, what they are, I do see the science winning out that if you're vaccinated, you're not going to get a lot of this stuff. And even if you do, come up with COVID, even after you've been vaccinated, it's happened. It's not nearly as severe as it would have been had you not. But a very prominent United States senator in this country, Lindsey Graham, who had been vaccinated, and then he got COVID again, but it's a very mild case.
Of course.
So one of the things I just try to point out on my show is I look at the numbers. I don't try to look at whether it's a right issue or a left issue, liberal or conservative issue. I just try to stick to the facts, and it's undeniable that in countries that have a higher vaccination rate, fewer problems. I'm not saying that's universal. I'm not saying there are wrinkles in that, but I try to devote my show when covering this to the facts, to the emergence of this Delta variant, how serious is it, and leave the politics to other people.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay, so would you say like you're a man of science? If you see the facts, then that's what you're going to believe, or do you like form your opinions on?
Well, it's funny. In our country, we have a guy who's been heading this effort, Rowan, looking at the science, and he is the first to tell you, this Dr. Anthony Fauci, that the science changes. That there was a view that there would be a limit on the virus's progression if everyone got vaccinated. And then we had this Delta variant that complicated things a little bit, tested these vaccines a little bit more, even prompted talk about needing booster shots to deal with them. But he would be the first to tell you, the thing about science is it evolves, but you do have to follow doctors' guidelines more than politicians' guidelines. 100%. And I think there's a pressure, certainly in this country, to politicize this. There's some people who think that it's a violation of their personal freedoms to get, the vaccine. Now, again, keeping my opinions out of it, I think the science shows that,
of course,
take the vaccine, you're going to live. Don't take the vaccine,
exactly.
You might not. And I'm not the brightest bulb on the tree, guys, but I just think that it behooves us to stick to those kind of facts, which are the real ones here. And whatever people, very passionate feelings, anti-vaccine or anti-this, or there's a large percentage of the population in this country who thinks that this is a cabal and a way for the deep state to spy on them and maybe launch something in that vaccine in their blood system. And I'm just saying, all right, this is nuts. And I just want to try to relay the facts, look at what's going on, and leave it at that. But it becomes very heated. It's a very heated argument.
Of course. And I was going to ask Neil, how was it interviewing Fauci? Because obviously he's got such a big role in America. And a lot of controversy as well. As you discussed, vaccines, they develop and change over time. Rowan and I were recently talking about polio. Polio was originally an oral vaccine.
That's right.
Look how it's taken now. Obviously, COVID's most likely going to develop and change over time. We've had the Delta variant pop up and stuff, and it obviously must be quite a stressful job on scientists at the moment.
It is, and I don't know exactly the procedure, the agencies that approve and then get the vaccines that are out there in Australia, for example. But the one thing that's not been done in this country is we have something called the Food and Drug Administration that will decide whether these emergency measure drugs, whether you're talking Pfizer's or Moderna's or Johnson & Johnson's, a host of others. But a lot of people here, I don't know how it is where you guys are, when they hear that granted emergency approval, to them that doesn't count. That they'd like an official stamp of approval from the Food and Drug Administration, which is kind of like the final arbiter on things. And
For sure.
we're told that in a couple of weeks, few weeks, that might happen. Maybe that will get some people who've not been vaccinated to vaccinate. I don't think it's going to move the needle much, though. I do think that the spikes, though, and it's gotten to be a very pain in the butt feature of this, that if you don't get vaccinated, you're not allowed in to businesses. Some of them will fire their workers if they refuse to get vaccinated. That's the right thing to do as a business. But I think just that alone is going to compel people to get vaccinated.
For sure. Yeah, there's been whole talks of being a COVID passport and stuff like that. People when they travel, go to this and that. And by the
way, to your point, we will be requiring that. I understand the Biden administration is looking at that foreigners coming into this country must have proof that they've been vaccinated. They haven't definitely made that policy, but they're very, very close.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think it's such a controversial thing around the world, because you have a lot of people who think, oh, this is fake, this was made in the lab, it's been put out to get the government to control us. And I just can't look at those people and think it's a bit ridiculous when we look at especially the deaths throughout America, Europe, those massive first world countries fully developed, and we see the death tolls in those countries rather than the third world countries. And I think it's kind of a bit strange to believe that this is all fake and just for government control.
It's a crazy time, guys. And I wish I could cite, one news channel in America over another, but there are nuts everywhere. And I hear from them. Even having Dr. Fauci on, some people say, he's at the deep state, and he knew about this, and he's behind the 4 million people who died worldwide. I don't know where to go with that. I always think back to times when a couple of brave people went around, it looks like the earth is round. Galileo and Copernicus, they just said, really, take our word for it. And people went nuts.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's the version of that, and it worries me because I know, look, we all have our differences. I get that. That's okay. But then people go into crazy town and say, obnoxious kind of things. So I hear it, and I know other people hear it as well, but I just try to look at the facts. I think, Rowan, you had mentioned about, availability of shots and all. Look at Africa, where it's only 2% there who've been vaccinated. No wonder why they have out of control virus cases. And that shouldn't be. I always look at America. We have so many of these vaccines, some of these American companies. We've got plenty, not only for booster shots, and every single American alive. And we're trying to provide them for some of these other countries and all, and you run into resistance on this issue, and it's an administrative nightmare and all. But it's so tragic to me because, like you were saying earlier about polio, there were a lot of people who were leery of that, and then they thought, well, only take a polio vaccine if you've got the vaccine. Well, unfortunately, it's if you got polio, but it's too late for that. Right? So, but there were people who were very resistant to it, and I get it and the fear of it, and I understand some people have had problems with vaccines, but I tell you, look abroad and just look at the data, guys. I mean, it
speaks for itself.
Few vaccinations, lots of problems. Lots of vaccinations, a lot fewer problems.
100%. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I'm not sure what it's like in America, but in Australia, especially when we do talk about the vaccines, obviously we have had a couple of people die from the vaccines, but the problem is the news covers that so much that everyone thinks, oh shit, like this is a brand new vaccine that's out. Right. This is a brand new vaccine that's out. It gives us something to blame for the deaths. And so a lot of people...
you mentioned that too, and I was actually looking in history with the polio vaccine when it first came, because that was something on a large and a grand scale, the likes of which we had not seen. And there was a 4% fatality rate, I guess, in the earliest days. And,
huge.
You got 100 million Americans, let's say, and 4 million might be dying. That's a little scary. I get that. But, that's what the people will focus on. And I think, sometimes we've tried to run on our show, here are the odds of getting struck by lightning. Here are the odds of getting mauled by a grizzly. Here are the odds of dying in a monsoon. And all of them are higher than the threat of death or even severe injury from any one of these vaccines. But you're quite right. And the anti-vaccine crowd here, responded to some blood clot issues that happened, in younger people. I don't remember what the numbers were. They were anxious, I grant you, but not at all statistically relevant. And I just think that this is the kind of thing that gets the attention.
100%.
100%. And I mean, I feel like we could talk about the coronavirus for the rest of eternity.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
That's it. But I reckon let's kind of take a step back. So obviously growing up all over the place, what was kind of like going into high school like? Did your parents have an influence on like what you wanted to do throughout high school? Or what was that experience like for you?
Well, this might surprise you. When I was in school, I wanted to be a priest.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Very little money in it. But it's funny, having an Irish mom, of course, that was great.
Yeah.
Well, son of a priest. But I thought a dream job would be a priest at a Catholic school teaching journalism. I liked to write. I was interested in the news. I was a nerd. I wish I would say that. I played football, not your football, the American football.
Yeah, that's
horrible. I was horrible. I had the cleanest uniform on the team because I was never put out on the team. And I was a big kid, so they put me as a tackle or a guard, and just sort of stand there and just flop on people. And that
just look intimidating.
Yeah, and believe me, I didn't look intimidating. It was like the Pillsbury Doughboy coming at you. You're saying, okay, let's ram this guy. And so I wish I had some heroic memories of high school, but I really was in to reading and doing all the nerdy things. I was on the debate club. I was all of this stuff, and very, very into wanting to be a priest. And when I went to college, and then my first year, that kind of convinced me. Well, I don't know about the priest thing. I might want to leave it. It was devastating for my mom.
Yeah.
Because I then kind of veered into journalism. But when I got my first job out of college later, my Italian dad would say, Neil, you're the only guy I know who could find a lower paying job than being a priest. And but he was right. But it was just a weird way of growing up and seeing what would make sense.
What was your first job, Neil?
I had a variety of since I was a little kid. I had a newspaper route. I didn't like that. There was a lot of exercise involved with that. Man, I had a paper run that went like a 10-mile radius at a minimum.
Gee whiz.
We lived in a neighborhood where the homes are pretty far apart. I'm just thinking, I got to do this all before school starts. I'm getting up at 4 a.m. That didn't pan out. Then I found, I think, my knitting, a variety of other jobs. My real knitting was working at a fast food restaurant. And it was Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips. You might remember. It was a big thing. It was for what? It's since, kind of lost its own in the hamburger world. But I rose to manager of that place at 17.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure that impresses you. And it was a great experience. And I like that. I like the idea. Fascinated by money involved in exchange and how how it's easy so easy in that business to lose money and not be profitable. And I might say soon after I left, Arthur Treacher fell on hard times. I don't think it's coincidental.
Because you lost Neil Cavuto as manager.
Yeah, exactly.
The best manager in the world.
Your product, but he found a way to put money on you.
Neil, I want to ask you, what kind of led you? What was like your first real realization that this is what I want to do? This is what I want to spend the rest of my future doing?
I don't know if there was like a magical moment, but as a little kid, I was fascinated in news. I heard stories. I don't know whether my mother was exaggerating a bit, that I would sit glued to watching political conventions as a baby in front of the TV.
Wow.
As a 9-year-old, I was watching the 1968 convention, which was a big divisive one in this country at the time. Martin Luther King had just been assassinated. Robert Kennedy shortly after him. That was a decade prior where, of course, President John Kennedy was assassinated. There was so much going on. We had the Vietnam War. We had all of this. And it was fascinating to me. So, other kids were watching cartoons. And I was watching, Walter Cronkite and some of these legends of business and news. I don't know what it was. It was just I was fascinated by what was going on.
Well, I feel like that period in American politics would almost become like one of the golden ages, because there was so much going on over there.
100%.
And what's interesting about it, Rowan, at the time, like I said, I grew up in a lot of places, and at that time, in around 1968, I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, and that was where Martin Luther King was from.
Yeah.
After his assassination, of course, Atlanta erupted, like with so many other cities and states, and the racial riots, and later after the killing of Robert Kennedy. And I'm not saying that as a kid I had a front row seat. We were out of the main trouble spots of all that, but it was history being played out in my very neighborhood, and I just was fascinated. My father used to relate stories. I asked him so many questions about who's riding there, how close are you to the riding going on there, and it really wasn't as bad as I was, making it out to be. But you'd hear it and see it, and it's not like news today. We had only half hour every day of the newscast versus 24-hour news networks today. Yeah. But I was absolutely riveted by it. And I couldn't stop watching.
Wow. Do you think that has that's really changed in this modern world, Neil? Is that when you were young, you'd put on the television and you'd see the news, and that was about it really. But nowadays you've got so many different, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and stuff. And, especially appealing to the younger generation, that's where they get their news from.
You're right.
And often that can be very skewed because you have very out there opinions from people as opposed to the actual facts. What would you have to say about that?
No, I think you're right. I think it was a very different time. I always think, and I don't know the media, the coverage, you get it in Australia or covering Prime Minister or how things are going. But in our country, there was a time where, television, I know it seems crazy to you, and of course you've moved way beyond television to higher technology, but television was really still in its infancy when I was a child. I mean, not everyone had it. It was a big drug, don't get me wrong, but newscasts were, like I said, relegated to a half an hour each night. Now, 24/7 news environment, everything is hyper, and they've got to keep that programming on, and they've got to keep you watching, and they've got to follow whether it's President Biden or Donald Trump before him or Barack Obama before him. Every single second is covered. I often liken that we had the same nonstop press coverage when FDR was president in this country, or Winston Churchill was leading Britain. Would they have been able to survive in that constant quest for dirt, information, behind the scenes? It's no mystery that John Kennedy had a very substantial personal life, right? So would the understanding that was the case back then, where no one scrutinized what he was doing with other women or what have you, would that survive today? Absolutely
not.
But I think that the mad rush for information, you get a mad rush for stuff that shouldn't be information, or that I'm not saying don't cover that sort of thing, but it becomes all obsessive all the time, and substantive debating of issues and trying to solve issues proves that more can sometimes be a lot less, and I think that's one thing that troubles me.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, with society right now, I feel like when you do talk to people, especially about certain topics, everyone can get a bit on edge nowadays. I'm not sure. I feel like back when the news was first coming out, television was first starting to be a thing, you'd be able to have debates with people about certain topics that they wouldn't be as on edge. But nowadays, I think with people being able to have so many opinions, so much news, fake or true, in front of them, I know I've definitely had conversations with people where it has been edgy and it has got into a bit of more argument terms, I guess. So like being on air and being a Fox News anchor and having people who have so many different opinions on air, does it get a bit edgy sometimes, or what would you like?
It gets edgy a lot, and I don't like it. I'm not, this anger that envelops people. I don't hide this from anyone, guys. I think you knew Rowan, but I had MS. I had cancer. I had open heart surgery. So for me, given those experiences, I had a kind of a different view on life. I'm not trying to minimize all these other things, but I don't think there's ever reason to be pissed off for something like a political opinion, or someone likes this president versus someone who doesn't. Someone likes government spending, someone else doesn't. I'm not angry about either. You have an opinion on that, that's fine. But I have friends who are liberals, friends who are conservatives. Within my own family, they run the gamut. That should not be a dividing feature, but we get enraged, so pissed off about crap. And I'm just thinking, you know what warrants screaming and ranting? Losing your home, losing a loved one, seeing your health, compromised when you least expected it. A plane crash, a 9/11. Those are things that warrant getting worked up, getting stunned, wondering what the hell is this all about? And I believe me, I don't want to get into a Debbie Downer situation with you here, but I really get pissed off if people get pissed off about things they shouldn't get pissed off. And I'm just wondering, surely you have more important things to do, but I hear, and I've seen this with relatives and friends who won't talk to each other because of their political views. A lot of that was happening during the Trump years, pro or con, and they don't talk to each other. As far as I know, they're still not talking to each other. That happens in Italian families, guys. I've gone to in my family. I have aunts and uncles who haven't talked to each other in decades, and they don't know why the hell that is. It was a slight back in the 70s. My point is that you get so immersed in that, and I just think, life is fun. It's a challenge. There are good things, there are bad things. But be grateful that you're alive to bitch, and don't bitch about being alive. That's it. Just you to know.
Yeah, I genuinely think that. I think it's the knowledge that we're all going to die that brings clarity to there being life, and clarity of wanting us to have goals and wanting us to succeed, wanting us to find love.
And you see it around when we do, sadly, and unfortunately you don't have this near the degree we do in the United States. You do see it after these shootings at malls or schools or what have you. I don't think any of the relatives of those victims are wondering whether they were Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative, had money, didn't have money. I don't think they're really focused on whatever spending plan is going on in the United States or Australia or Europe, or how people are responding right now to vaccinations in this country or your country or any country. They've lost the level. It's gone. The meaning of their life has just been shattered. And when that happens, just like it did 20 years ago in this country close to it, on 9/11, it jars people and it brings them back to what's important. I mean, one of my favorite presidents in this country was John Kennedy, who famously said, in the end, we all breathe the same air, and we all respect the same things, and we all want the best for our kids. That's what unites us. The other stuff is just bullshit. And I just think that we forget that. And sometimes, tragically, these events that happen now and then jar us to our senses. But I think, as you guys have been kind of getting at here, not long enough and not sustained enough.
Yeah, exactly right. And I totally agree with you. Like, it doesn't matter brown, black, whites, Asian, anything. We all bleed red, and it goes to show that throughout society, there's genuinely so much hate around the world, and some people don't even know why. Like you were saying with your family, like they haven't spoken for so many years because of a small issue that happened way back when, but you see all the issues over in Afghanistan and in Africa and over in Europe, and there's just so much hate around the world. And I don't think that a lot of people have been able to experience a life-changing moment to be like, oh wow, like life actually is precious. And I think you're right. And I
think, some of our best leaders anywhere, and you go any region, country, time period, have been the ones who stepped back, who defied whatever their so-called politics or party label was, and tried to do simply the right thing, tried to be motivated by something that was bigger than themselves. But we're so caught up in ourselves, we're so caught up about, this push to be histrionic. It's pushed to be something you're not. I oftentimes see, when I see my fellow journalists, anchors, and all, not all, but they're really good people. I mean, I like them all. They're funny as all hell. Just like when I go to Washington, D.C., and, the Democrats and Republicans going at each other. But when they're with each other, they're slapping each other in the back. They're laughing, guffawing. Camera lights come on, and instantly, it's asshole time. And I have to just
Really?
shout and scream and say, you're pathetic, and, you're a Nazi, you're a liberal flake, and yet they don't really believe that. And
It's just a persona.
You're exactly right. Now I call it, professional wrestling. I mean, everyone has a part, and they do that part, they play that part. But when the lights go down and everything else, hey brother, how you doing? All this, and they're just killing each other minutes prior. That to me is what's dangerous, and I think in this hyperventilating culture, and social media, I think kind of exaggerates that and almost encourages that. So there's arguing back and forth, and there's a great benefit to its anonymity, where whether it's Twitter or whatever, I'll get a lot of people who will rip me a new one, but they won't leave their name. They won't, that's a code or an acronym or something. Now I admire someone who will say, I think you're just a, arrogant, dismissive asshole. And they sign it, John, let's say Slattery. Now they made up the name just like I just did. But I much more admire that than someone who is very obsequious about it, or doesn't say, or hides behind some anonymity. That really bugs me. And part of social media, and it's, it fits to your great generation here. I think your comfort level around that, and just the anonymity of it, and the grayness of it, fosters more. Because if you had to stand by everything you said, and everything you did, then would you still write the same thing? Would you still do the same thing? And I always tell, you remember, I have two teenage boys. I always like some, because they're always on that.
Yeah, of course.
And I always get the terminology wrong. The more you're on the info face, whatever, Facebook, it's this, that, it's this. I say everything you write is out there permanently. No, I can delete. I can. No, you can't, because we've done it at Fox. We could dig up people's tweets.
Yeah.
Donald Trump.
I just find that to be worrisome. Like, why can't you just talk? Why can't you just say? And I get the immediacy and the ease with which you go in and out of all of these social media sites. And I marvel at probably your ability, my kid's ability to I think son Bradley has like 16 sites up at once. And I'm thinking, this is ADD personified. But he's very comfortable in that environment, and I take nothing away from it, but I just don't want him to lose sense of who he is, and whether it's important that he have friends or followers or all of that. I just think it puts needless pressure. I'm just glad, guys, they didn't have this when I was in school.
No,
I told you I was like a loser with a capital L. I did not need people reinforcing the view, saying all sorts of crap about me.
Yeah.
I'd rather keep it to myself and a few people in my class who would know this one. But when it's this technology, it's the world.
Yeah. But still, being on TV every day, Neil, how does it feel that like people will find any single excuse or one single thing that you say just to scrutinize you?
Oh, you're not kidding. And it's funny, but I can recognize Rowan's emails a mile away. But my point is, we've got to just watch that. But I'm always amazed people say just god awful things, or they say things that I've never said. I remember one time someone was doing something on we were doing something on Trump, and did you hear Cavuto said Trump should die? Now, I never said any such thing. And the die, Trump never came together. Yeah. But then it got a following on some of these sites, and
spreads.
Well, that SOB, I always wondered, his bias and all that, and now he wants the president dead. And how do you refute a false negative? It's sort of like, when did you stop beating your wife? well, I never beat my wife, and so I didn't have to stop. And you're trying to justify it, but now you just get to the point, because I'll scroll through it, and my sons are funny with looking at stuff. Hey, Dad, you're trending right now for something, and sometimes it's good. Trending for something like it could be a good thing. A lot of times it's about someone has seen or sensed something that didn't happen, or they're recreating it. And then I've since discovered we all see things through the prism of our biases or point of view. That I get, but it takes a life of its own, and it worries me. It worries me a lot.
I mean, I feel like, especially for yourself and in America, when it comes to the politics and business side of America, it is so divided, so absolutely divided in America. So I feel like people are absolutely so biased to who they follow or their political party or what they think about Wall Street and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like you're in a very cutthroat industry kind of thing, especially because you have your 3 shows, Coast to Coast, Cavuto Live, and Cavuto, the business one as well.
Your world, they're boring. Each one is boring, but I'll tell you what, I try to avoid them becoming these histrionic, crazy shows. And I know what you say, and you both kind of touched on it, this idea that we are what we think. We all have views. And by the way, I always tell my various staffs, some not much older than you guys, that, look, I don't want you to be boring and dull and not have opinions. By all means, you have strong opinions and keep them. But they should not invade our broadcast. And you should be open and make sure that you're policing these, that they're not infiltrating even how you're booking. But people, for example, during the Trump years, I do remember you were either all in for Donald Trump or you were out.
You're out.
The same with Barack Obama before he was president. You either love him or you're going to hate him. And I have a very textured view of everyone. There are good people who have, bad days and bad issues that come up, and bad people who have good issues that come up.
Yeah.
I believe no one's a saint and no one's a full-time sinner. Maybe Hitler, maybe he gets the
the crown.
Evil.
Yeah.
But my point is that, and I remember this, there were some people just hated Barack Obama when he was president. I made a point of commending him one time. There was some video that came into our newsroom where he quietly attended one of his daughter's soccer games. And I thought the video was odd, and I just thought, how did he pop up out of nowhere, out of the White House, to show a soccer game? And some people took video there. Well, I was just commending him as a dad. That's what I just thought, well, that's pretty impressive. And then I found out that he made all of his daughters, teacher-parent events. And I thought, geez, I haven't made all my, parent events. And I thought that was great. Well, you would have thought with some people, well, don't you know that he wasn't born in this country, that he was born on another planet or something. And conversely, with Donald Trump now, I would commend him on some of the things he was doing, coming in to get a handle on trade deals and a certain sameness to the way we did things in Washington. And he was very, unconventional and all of that. And I would commend for that and cite some of the promising things. He was cutting rules and regulations, taxes. It was pro and cons to all of that. But I would also call him out if he exhibited, bad behavior, or he, was going after, the leader of Canada and trying to equate that Canada was almost as bad as China.
For sure.
The United States. And I'm thinking,
but that's the thing, though. That's the one that gets all the spotlight, because if you look up Neil Cavuto on YouTube, all you find is you critiquing Trump, and that's the thing.
Now, on a personal level, that based on that, I'm not going to let that go by, and I'm not going to say this and all. And then he gets very mad at Fox for me in a particular case, and I should be fired because of those views. And he's never said a good thing about me. This is where people just say, "Oh, that's Neil. He's anti-Trump," and all. But I have said good things about him. I have said good things about some of his policies.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you have to look at it in the totality. Man, I was the same with Clinton. I was the same, with both the Bush presidencies. But that's news, because there's good and bad about everyone. But in these hyperbolic times, we remember the negative. But I got so sick and tired of hearing how any criticism is verboten. Well, part of our job as journalists is to criticize and to analyze. And so when I hear, Donald Trump, much as when I hear his successor, I'm saying things that I know are not accurate. When Donald Trump claimed that he inherited a depression, he didn't. When I hear Joe Biden say that he's the reason why, so many people are getting vaccinated in this country, well, to be fair, that started with Donald Trump, So I can see it both ways. And no matter how I personally feel, a lot of people say, aren't you angry at President Trump? Because he said these awful things about you at rallies and just horrible things, and people then pile on to that. Yeah, I don't like to be criticized, but it won't get in my way about looking at people in balance, nor as it, looking at big company issues, CEOs. You're going to get them ticked off one day and one way or the other, but I can't be guided by that. So people will form an opinion and just think, all right, well, that's what drives his show, and that's all he's about, anti-Trump or this or that. And I can't convince people otherwise. I mean, regular viewers, I think, will think he's a pretty straight shooter. He'll try to be fair, but there will be some. No, they will never, cut me any slack.
Well, I feel
they're free to do that.
Yeah.
I feel like you were saying, I think society a lot of the time creates a very unbalanced opinion of a person and not a balanced one.
Right.
Not taking into account negatives and positives, just taking into account all the negatives or all the positives. Like Donald Trump did do some really good things for America, but then the way that he, portrayed himself and did certain things on Twitter and everything like that, obviously negative, So
but
it's,
I do, I was saying, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do have a certain bias when it comes to how you treat people. I'm a big believer in being fair to people. And I always say to my staff, if this story ran on you, we had a story that this was being told about you, how would you feel about it? So when I see someone maligning someone personally, it's one thing for you to disagree with the leader of Canada or the leader of Australia about how they're responding to China or whatever. It's quite another for you to say he's a clueless dolt or where are we going with that? That, I think, the personal attack lines don't help anyone, and they make you look bad. So that's the thing. I'm very big on how you treat people. I'm not a yeller and screamer. If I have concerns about people on my staff, I'll quietly pull them aside and just say, keep doing it. But I'm not big in public humiliation. I don't think it's proper. Maybe it's back to my priest days and all, but I just believe you get far more treating people well than treating them poorly. And I think as long as they know that you're a fair or a straight shooter, then you're fine. But I think when you are just driven by drama and hateful things, that's very hard for you, I'm biased. I can't countenance that. I don't like it. I think it just makes things far worse. And I think it corrupts our soul. And it's happening in our country to the degree that, we're so divided in my country. And it's adequate because then we bring it down to personal insults or the look of someone or, whether in this country, you hear a lot, oh, Joe Biden's so old, he doesn't know what room he's in. Well, apparently he must know enough because he got elected president. So I always think, do we have to go there? Whatever your views, and the closer I get to that age, the kinder I am to that age group. But I don't like the personal attack. There are people written me another, oh, you fat bastard. And I said, well, you're right on the bastard part, but really? I don't think it's very constructive. And I think you lose the argument. I didn't like that about Trump. I did, and I'm not liked it when I see certain CEOs in this country, elsewhere, who make some flippant remarks. In this country, there's a big rush in the Wall Street community for them to get back to work in person. And one of the brokerage houses CEOs said, your cozy days sitting on the couch are done. Well, these people, telecommuting and doing all this from home, I don't know about in Australia, but they were very productive. They still did stuff. They're not just eating bonbons on a lounge chair. So I thought it was such a condescending, dickish comment to make. I didn't like it. And I viscerally didn't like it because it's easy for you to demand that these workers get back into the office as they battle with public transportation and you're barking orders from the back of your limo. I just immediately thought, stop it. But when I hear that, see that, maybe that's when I break out of this boring conformity and just say, whoa.
Yeah.
That's what you just said there is wrong. It's a lie. And you are foisting your, bully, belligerent views on a staff that's been busting their ass for you and putting up good numbers and keeping your company going quite strongly. So you might not want to, give them a thank you, but they do a hell of a lot better than a screw you. So that I feel gets out of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you were talking about your staff and younger people in like the Fox industry. What was it like for you? So obviously coming out of college, picking journalism, studying that, because I know I've definitely like seen on like different TV shows and stuff. It's very tough, and if you like stuff up, then it's like a chopping board kind of thing. So how did you rise to be the Neil Cavuto that everyone sees now? What was that behind the scenes, all the work that you did growing up to what you've been able to achieve now?
Well, I got here on my looks, as you guys probably figured. So I really didn't need the talent thing. But I will say this, that I knew I loved the profession already, because I know this sounds trite. You guys hear it a lot. But I truly believe not a day of my work life has felt like work. Obviously you have some pressure bosses, now and then. But I've been very lucky in that regard. Never gotten fired anywhere. Whatever. But I do think that the one thing I discovered very early on, and it's a competitive industry, but if you think about it, what industry isn't, right? Hard work. It's all about hard work. You really have to work hard. You really have to put the pedal to the metal. And I think that when I hear people saying how tough it is, well, nothing is going to be handed to you. And
for sure.
You can make an argument, oh, this is a rigged institution. But if you work really hard and you've got, half a brain and a good attitude, you're going to go far. I always try to tell some of the youngest people we hire when they first come in, something that a boss told me when I first started working at a business program in the United States. 40 years ago, called Nightly Business Report. It was on PBS, or public broadcasting system. And he was this very wise old guy. I think even back then, he was probably no more than 50, but I had him pegged for 80 because he was very slow.
It's funny you say that, Neil. I've heard people comment that I wouldn't have Neil Cavuto a day over 40. And then you look at how long you've been in the industry for.
See if they can email or tweet me. Like with this guy, even back then as a kid in the business growing up, I mean, he was so labored, but he was the grand poobah. It was like the managing editor.
Yeah.
He told me one thing. He says, I see a lot of very talented people come in and out of this sport. People who move up are the people who move their ass. And I always thought, that does make sense. And some of the greats in any business, not all, and I'm not trying to be universal about it, are those who just work hard. That it's so important that they work hard. In our country, we have this great football player. Remember the American football, the real.
We could have an argument about that.
But this Tom Brady, he's like 43, 44 years.
Still around.
He's as strong as he was when he was 23, 24.
Yeah.
And when you look at his regimen, his health regimen, what he eats, what he does, the meticulous nature which he goes to bed, takes naps, does all this, he is a wonder, a physical wonder, but it's also mental. He never lets anything get him down. He can get frustrated, but he's never negative. He's never said a bad word about anyone throughout his career. And I always find that remarkable. That there are some people who are angry at him, jealous of him, when he keeps winning Super Bowls and all, there's enough already, But he never responds when people will have comments or zing him on something. He'll just, shrug his shoulders and say, oh, whatever. He doesn't hold a grudge. And I admire that. I've seen others who have done that. And I just said, that's the way to be. And some of the greats in my business, I've seen do that. Everyone, we all have different personalities, but the one common thread among the really successful ones, they work hard at what they do because they love what they do. Again, that's very cliche-ish, but it's true.
Yeah.
So for anybody wanting to go into the industry or just in general, is that kind of the advice that you'd give them? Just work hard. If it's something that you're passionate about, it will just come naturally like it did to you.
I think so. I know it sounds, well, really, I mean, this whole podcast is a waste of time with Cavuto because he's not really imparting any great information. But I always tell people, showing up is the biggest thing. I told you I worked at that fast food restaurant.
Yeah.
I became a manager. I don't know if I told you I became a manager.
A manager at 17.
That's right.
Yeah, there we go. But one of the things I would have to do is hire people, if we needed, and get this turnover there.
Yeah.
And I could always kind of tell that, somebody did this for money. I mean, you're not going in there like, oh, yeah, that's what I want to work in.
Yeah.
Put fish, chips in the fry later, and that's my goal right there. But it's how you do it. It's how you do it and how involved you are doing it, and whether you want to give it your best. It's half of the thing in life is showing up, being reliable, being on time, having a great attitude. Nothing is more draining than people who are negative. I remember years ago, guys, I had to address, they didn't have to, I was happy to address a large group of the Multiple Sclerosis Society. They were having their annual meeting. And I was so, before the speech, there was like a cocktail reception. So many were coming up to me angry and they're sad. It's a debilitating disease. I won't hide that from you. And it gets worse. I'm prepared for that. But I can't control it. I can't blame anyone else where I got it. It's a bum's luck. I had other luck. But my point when I finally got to speak there is I said, it's not fun having this disease. It isn't. And you're right to be angry and feeling sorry for yourself. But as I went on, I just said, you have to get over it. It's not your spouse's fault you have this. It's not your kids' fault you have this. They owe you nothing. They try to be understanding, but don't use this as a lever over them and a guilt trip for them because you're pissed off that you have a life-compromising disease. And I probably was just as much speaking about and to myself because in the early days, I was that way. And I finally realized none of these people I love, they have anything to do with this. My wife is the patience of a saint. She's trying to deal with this egocentric nut she married who feels, all sorry for himself. And, but I was trying to tell them, we all bear a cross in life. I know, you could line up all these trite pieces of advice I've been giving here, guys, and that could go a whole nother podcast. But we all bear our own crap, right?
Yeah.
We all bear our own crap.
Very true.
And I was just trying to tell them, yeah, you've got this. Someone else has lost a loved one. Yeah, a horrible thing has happened. Yeah, you've got a serious thing going on. Or yeah, you've just lost a job. And I remember thinking when I was going through this, when I was first diagnosed with this disease, feeling all over, because I'd been over cancer and I was just getting this all over again. My wife had it with me, like, oh my God, now this, and he's going to be a nightmare. And I was. I would sleep around the clock in my room. I wouldn't get up, wouldn't get out. And she would send me little notes of so-and-so called, wish you well. Another card, you ought to call this person up, wish you well, hope you would be better. And just because of what I do, guys, a lot of them were pretty big people too, senators,
of course,
presidents. I'm not saying that to brag, but to illustrate that a lot of people were worried about me and I was acting like a jerk and I wasn't hearing that. And in the course of this, I get over myself. I started getting back to them. Thank you for your phone call or your nice note. And then a couple of them would start telling me things. Neil, you think you have it bad. I lost my wife and son. Another person telling me this factory and business that I started years ago, Neil, burnt to the ground. I have nothing now. I'm trying to start all over. And I was thinking about it. I said, boy, man, this would make a great book because I've been so immersed in myself that these people are saying they were there too. But here I thought I was the only one suffering, being the egocentric TV guy I was. And I was reminded now that there are people that have a hell of a lot worse than me. And I wrote a book on that. And I remember it was the first book for me. And a lot of people said, we want a business book out of you. I said, well, I'm going to call this book More Than Money, but it's not about money. It's not about business. They said, well, this won't go anywhere because it's you talking about horrible stuff that happened to people, but it did do well. It did become a New York Times bestseller. I'm not saying that to brag, but it did become a New York Times bestseller. And I think what connected, in all seriousness,
say it again.
Yeah, New York Times bestseller. But what connected is another level. It helped me to realize we all have to deal with stuff in our lives.
For sure.
At different times. And, you guys are young, and I know, life is a great life is ahead of both of you, and I hope it is. But there will be some bad things to happen. They haven't already. I don't know you that well. I know certainly enough that I've been impressed, but bad things can happen and will.
Of course.
And I think the lesson I learned is to be less of a putz and more understanding of the fragility of life. And it gets back to all we were talking about, how you treat people, how you respond to people, how you, are just as honest as you could possibly be without being in your face. So I think the benefit I have of dealing with illness is something that has sharpened my appreciation of life for what matters. And I think we could all be reminded of that. And I think sometimes these people, when they were anonymous and horrific things, I can never picture ever doing them. And I always worry about people who do. And I think life is so brief that it's not worth the trouble. I mentioned JFK or John Kennedy a little earlier. He had a great line, because he had a great sense of humor about it. He would say, forgive your enemies, but never forget their names. And I thought it was a funny way of saying, look, I'm not going to dwell on how awful people have been. But by the same token, I'm not going to forget how they've been. I don't want it to dominate my life. I don't want that hatred, like we were saying about showing up at a funeral, ignoring people like you have for the last few decades. That comes up. But then you got to ask yourself, what am I doing? It's nuts.
Exactly right.
And
I'll
if
totally,
you go,
you go, Pat.
Oh, we always have this problem, Neil. I'll go. Neil, so you feel like that tribulation with MS and, all that stuff going on, do you feel like you turned that bad into good, and you feel like anybody could? Because, you wrote a New York Times bestseller, and that wouldn't have happened if that didn't happen,
No, you're right. And I'll tell you guys, I mean, it hones you in, it sharpens your focus. I think in a way, it's God's way of jarring you back to your senses and saying, come here. I can't tell you the times, and I always, like with my kids, I have a daughter and 2 sons, when they don't feel like talking to an aunt or an uncle, and I said, there's time that person's going to be gone. You're going to wish, why didn't I spend a few more minutes? Why didn't I do that? And I thought of that after my father passed away. Fortunately, I was aware of things enough that I did do a lot with him, and I did do a lot with my mom. But in retrospect, I said, there were times when I was going to go out to, and go see friends when I visit home from college, and they wanted me to be with them, and I would juggle it and all that. But I thought, would it kill you? Would it kill you to do more stuff like that, to get out of yourself a little bit and just see that? Again, it's stuff you know so well, but I think in this complicated, hyperventilating world, sometimes we just forget to be human beings. Sometimes we just forget to when someone says, I'm going to write I might send a note or a quick call to this person because I've been worried about them, and maybe I won't. It's getting late, and I won't. Do it. Do it. Yeah. Because you don't know. We had in this country, you guys probably heard of it, this Florida condo implosion where the building collapsed on itself. And one of the stories, it was such a difficult story to get through because some of these stories were so tragic, like they were in 9/11, and they happen all the time. And you guys are dealing with not too long back with the wildfires and everything else. Just horrific events that just destroyed so many lives. And I love the story of one child said, well, I was just with my mom and dad for dinner on Sunday, and I didn't want to go because, they're asking me to stay. They're asking me why aren't I married and all this other. It was a cute story, but he did. You know what I'm saying? He took the time and he was grateful for that. And I think, God forbid you let something like that pass and something horrible happens. That old line, you know, treat every day like it's your last. I'm not saying you have to be that morose about it, but you do think, what can I do today
For sure.
to make a difference or to be a little bit more aware outside myself? We all get caught up in what we have to do, and that's the nature of life.
For sure.
Pressures.
For sure. Would you?
Not so much that we forget, you know, the people and events that are around us. I mean, you might remember around we had a German Shepherd here, and
That's right.
She passed away, and got sick all of a sudden, and that you might recall that other crazy dog is now running the house. But my point is that I love that dog. I love that German Shepherd. Out of the blue, didn't have a sick day in her life. All of a sudden, you know, her insides are exploding cancer everywhere, and I had to put her to sleep. And I thought, you know, so many times she had come up to me and went, I want to do this, you know, I want to sit by you, want to do this, or I want to go out for a ride, or I want to go for a walk, and I didn't do it. Now you might just say, look, it's a dog, it's a person, but do it. I'm not saying every time, but you'll never regret, you know, that extra time. You'll never regret that extra conversation. I've never met someone after a very successful or not a successful career. I should have worked a little harder. I should have worked, you know, put in a 12-hour day rather than a 10-hour day. Get what I'm saying about working hard is important, caring about what you're doing is important, but keeping your priorities is by far the most important.
100%.
Take the time for the things that we forget.
100%. Would you agree that time is the greatest gift that people have, but a lot of us just kind of take it for granted and say, oh, I wish I did this, I wish I did this, when they're on their deathbed.
You're right. And it's the fragility and the flimsiness of it. It's that, you know, naturally, because I maybe thought and had some of these issues, I think of them. My wife says, oh, you know, all right, we get it. You've been through a lot, you know, but you're really bothering me with to think deeply all the time. But I'm not trying to say that. I'm guilty of the same thing. A lot of people are. I get preoccupied, but I do stop to smell the roses. I do stop to look around and to see. We are what's in our heads. We are what we think and what we view. And you live and see life through that prism. Make it be a good prism. Make it be. Give the benefit of the doubt to someone you don't flip over. Give the benefit of the doubt to someone who's being, you know, ripped in the line. Give the benefit of the doubt to that colleague, and it might be a pain in the ass, but you realize, all right, I'm going to work with this person, so I'm going to try to make it work. Sometimes it's uncontrollable, and sometimes it's unworkable. But come at it with a positive view. Life is way too short. So again, I always tell people, go long and have a good view about it, and acknowledge the fact that things will go badly, but that in the end, you're better for that experience. You're
exactly
always better for it.
And I feel like that's something I think that all humans and what humanity is really, we all carry our own burdens and experience our own different things.
Absolutely.
I use this analogy where, like how do we drive a car? You know, we don't drive a car looking in the back mirror, because if we did, we'd be consistently crashing all the time.
Well, my wife does. But, that's fine.
And that's it. No, but we don't drive a car looking in the rear mirror, because it's so small, and we won't be able to see what we're going forward, and we'll keep crashing. And that's all the past. You can't keep dwelling on the past or the bad experience that happened to you, and you know, oh, maybe this person broke up with me, or this and that, because you'll keep crashing. And the front windscreen is so big, because you need to be able to see where you're going and what you're doing. And I feel like maybe if people just, like you said, take a step back and realize, this thing did happen to me, and it wasn't very good, and maybe I just need some time. But to be able to move forward, because time is so precious, as we have discussed. And I feel like in society, a lot of people take that for granted nowadays, to be honest.
Well, we live with the anchors that can weigh us down, and some have legitimate, serious anchors. I mean, a very good friend of mine from high school who had an abusive father, just a horrible father. And without going into a lot of the details, it was horrific. He is one of the greatest dads, now granddads, you could possibly be. He learned from that there are ways to raise a child and grandchildren. And he could have been saddled with that and been the victim. I had a horrible upbringing and all this. I get that. And we all have dealt with variations of that. But he didn't let it imprison him. I think some people, maybe back to those Italian relatives of mine, they let that imprison them. They let that define their lives, just like an illness or something that's very tough. I'd be lying to you guys if I said, yeah, I get pissed off when I have trouble walking, when I have trouble seeing, and I get angry about it because I feel like, what the hell? You know, but it's no one else's fault. It's not even my fault. It's just luck or bad luck of the genes.
Exactly.
But I think we can become imprisoned by that, or we can just try to, get that in perspective. And I think some of the great people I've known have dealt with far, far worse. I think of, FDR in this country lost his ability to walk. Parents in this country after school shootings, some have built foundations to go after violence in schools and to turn that around. They'll never get their kids back, but they'll try to make sure there are never any other kids like them again. And that takes huge guts and an ability to get past stuff. But they're the ones that, I admire. They're the ones that I just say, wow, I could put in perspective any of the crap I'm doing. I mean, and then that defines us. And those people a mile away. You get a sense of it when you see them. That it's full character. It's just full character and reasons.
Yeah. So would you say through all your experiences and everything you've been through, would you say like sitting in that chair right now, you would be content with who you are and what your views are and your family and everything like that now?
Well, you're never going to be perfect. I'd like to have a thinner me. But your point is well taken. It's not, if I had things to do over again or could do over or could make more, I keep telling you guys about, I wish I'd spend more time. Grandmother or mother and father at certain times. I look back and it makes me pivot to today, or who are the people I want to be around with and do stuff with. One of the great beauties of the pandemic, in a weird way for me, doing a show at a home every day or a year plus, is I got to be with my family more, and it was very interesting. I got to hear just how out of control my teenage sons are, and to see it. So all this stuff my wife told me was indeed true.
Indeed true.
So, but I think, bad things, or because of it, we can make something out of it. We can learn, something from it and improve our attitude. But at our core, like we were saying right at the beginning, we're all human beings. We all breathe that same air. We all share this planet for a brief time. Let's not be jerks over here. Let's try to be the best we can be. It will help you in life. It will help your career. It'll help you be a better, son or daughter or father or mother, because you care, because it's important that you care. That's all part of life. Just relish it, appreciate it. And while you're tempted sometimes to bitch about it, just try not to.
That's beautiful.
No, exactly right. So with that, what would you say the three most influential people in your life that's kind of shaped you to who you are today?
Well, that's easy. My mother, my father, and my wife. I mean, simple as that. Simple as that.
Just like that.
My mother and father, just because they didn't have any college education or anything like that, but they had a lot of common sense. They were from different political extremes. My father used to joke he would run to the polls to vote the opposite of my mother just to cancel her out. But they loved each other to death, and they would, fight like any couple, but they, at their core, they just wanted the best for their kids. They just, and they, no matter what you did, they understood and they figured, you're going to make a lot of big mistakes. But my father had some great advice, guys, and I don't know if your parents or kind of relay this. He would always say, Neil, stay humble. But in your case, it'll come in handy. And what he was trying to say is he was getting older and I was beginning my TV career, and he could see that I was having a little bit of success at it. His big fear is that I would become an arrogant jerk. And I didn't become a jerk, but I think what he was just trying to say, never forget your roots, never forget where you came from, and or the people who you passed on the way up. My Irish mom would have a great line, said, well, remember the people, you stepped on the ladder up because you're going to step on them on the way down. They were both saying the same thing. Get over yourself and remember it's not about yourself. And my wife, just on patience alone. I mean, in that whole sickness and health thing, I mean, she did get the short end of the stick. But one time she had a cold. It was got bad. It developed into some kind of bronchitis. So I figured, all right, after cancer, the heart surgery, and multiple sclerosis, we're now even. I took care of you through this cold. But that matters. Sticking by someone when they're having a tough time. You learn the importance of that.
For sure.
Because all the other stuff.
With that being said, Neil, how would you, to end off the podcast, how would you give any advice to anybody watching? I know you've been given plenty of advice and you've given plenty of your own throughout this podcast. Right. But if there was, one piece of advice that you could give anybody, what would it be?
Yeah, I think, guys, it's the world. It changes. Things change. Pressures change. But the one constant is us. The one constant that unites us is the DNA of those who came before us. And we've gotten through it. There's a very popular song of Billy Joel in this country years back, We Didn't Start the Fire. This notion that pick a generation, what they were dealing with, and what your generation is dealing with right now. What my dad's generation in World War II, what they dealt with then, and the Depression, and before him, those who in this country were dealing with, the Great Depression prior to that. I just think that we sometimes think and get fixated on what's happening now, somehow believing that it hasn't happened before. You talk about the 9/11 generation, there was the Pearl Harbor generation, there was the World War II, World War I generation. There were calamities, unfortunately, have happened time and again, multiple times with multiple generations. No group of people at any time owns tragedy. And I like to remind people when tough times come up, we've been there, we've done that, we've gotten through that.
You think that links well to COVID at the moment? It's just.
Well, I think it's part of it. I do think it's part of it. We get, in the moment, it is scary, and it does, and people, millions have died, and trust me, not trying to minimize that, but I am trying to also say, we'll get through this. We are getting through this. You're having scary times in Australia, but you will. And Australia's gotten through a heck of a lot worse. And I just think that, the history of humankind is that in the most horrific moments we've come out. My father would be, seeing all the great relationships this country now has with Germany and Japan, and bitter enemies that were killing each other. That the cycle of life is to make amends just as much as it is to make war. And I like to put it on the side of amends more than war. We've got to be conscious, though, of the fact that can happen. We can slip in to the negative that sometimes dominates our thinking, our policies, and even leads to things like war. Or we can step back, get over ourselves, listen to others' points of view, treat people like you'd like to be treated yourself. We can avoid all of these calamities. We've been a species, for thousands of years, through so much. There'll be tough times, horrific times, I have no doubt, in the future. But I always feel ultimately worn out by far better things. That's how I see life. A lot of people say, oh, you're naive, you're out to lunch and all that. And I do take very strong drugs, so maybe that's part of it. But I'll tell you, it is far better to see the great potential than all the problems.
The glass is half full, not half empty. That's it.
That's right. Now that is a very good comment right there. I'm going to write that.
Well, Neil, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been an absolute blast. And I'm sure that everyone has gained some wisdom and knowledge from yourself. It's been absolutely amazing.
You guys ask great questions. Just, hold off going into this business here, because there could be serious competition. Those are excellent questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Neil. Means a lot coming from you.
It
Thanks
does.
a lot.
I mean, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And guys, thank you so much for watching. We appreciate it. Feel free to check this out on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And we will see you next week. Again, Neil, thank you so much.
No, thank you guys. Be well.
Okay.
Thank you
Bye
guys.
now.
Take
too.
care.